Hey, I'm Mr. Blessed, and today we're going to destroy your childhood. You watched Pixar movies and thought they were about friendship, adventure, and life lessons, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now I'm going to show you what's hiding underneath. We're going to go from cute little Easter eggs all the way down to the bottom where existential horror, eternal suffering, and death are waiting. After this, you will never watch these movies the same way again. Let's start at the surface. The most harmless place, a movie about cars. The first time you watched Cars, you saw bright racing, a funny tow truck named Mater, and a small town at sunset. Everything felt warm, cozy, simple. But here's one question that should wake you up. Why does a world full of living cars have door handles? Think about that for real. A door handle is a device built for one single purpose. So a creature with hands, with fingers, with a gripping reflex can pull a door open and walk inside. Cars don't have hands. Cars don't have fingers. A car physically cannot use a door handle. So why are they there? The right answer to that question is one of the darkest concepts ever smuggled into children's animation. It's called the homunculus theory. Here's the idea. The cars in the Cars universe aren't just living metal organisms. They're cybernetic exoskeletons, steel, chrome, and paint on the outside. Inside mutated, atrophied, shriveled remains of human beings who, over thousands of years, fused with their vehicles so completely that the line between driver and machine stopped existing. Forever, door handles exist because they were there before, when people were still people, when they still climbed into these cars from the outside. Now, those handles are vestigial, like the tailbone on a human, like the tiny hind leg bones inside a whale's skeleton. They're evolutionary leftovers from the era when humanity hadn't yet locked itself inside its vehicles forever. And here's where the real horror starts, because the evidence for this theory is scattered across the entire film, and it's biological. Mater reacts to wasabi. Not just wrinkling at the smell, he tastes it. It burns him. He has taste buds, salivary glands, pain receptors in his mouth. Ask yourself, why would a purely mechanical organism need taste buds? There's only one answer. They're there because somewhere inside that metal frame, there's a small, shriveled, solution-suspended human being who uses them. Keep going. Lightning McQueen literally sticks out his tongue in one scene. A living, pink, fleshy, flexible tongue. Muscle tissue. Not metal, not plastic, organic. And if you look at the character's teeth, here's another layer of insanity. McQueen's teeth are straight, white, one solid plate. But Mater's? Yellow, uneven, some missing, some rotting. Tooth decay is the breakdown of enamel by bacteria. Metal doesn't rot. Biological tissue does. Dentin. Enamel. The stuff human teeth are made of. Mater doesn't brush his teeth. The tiny man inside Mater doesn't brush his teeth. But there's more. Lightning McQueen hiccups. In one of the short films, after he drinks too fast from a canister, he starts hiccuping. A hiccup is an involuntary spasm of the diaphragm, a purely biological reflex. An internal combustion engine can stall. It can misfire, but it cannot hiccup in a physiological sense. A hiccup needs a diaphragm, a living, smooth, contracting muscle, which is in there, somewhere inside. And now, the final argument, the one that locks this theory shut for good. There's an internal Pixar document called The World of Cars Owner's Manual. It was written by Jay Ward, the creative director of the entire franchise. And this document has one rule. You will never see the doors open, because that's where the brain and eyes are, and we don't want anything falling out the side. Brain and eyes. Not an onboard computer, not a processor, not an electronic control unit. A brain. A pink, pulsing, living brain. It sits inside the cabin, behind closed, tinted windows. And if the door opens, it might fall out. This is not a metaphor. This is the official production manual. This is what the filmmakers wrote for themselves as the rules of their world. Now tell me, do you still think this is a fun little movie about race cars? But wait, because we haven't gotten to the graveyard yet. Here's what you didn't know about Cars. During production, a scene was created, it was called Lost, that was completely cut from the final film. And when you find out why, you'll understand just how far the creators were willing to go. In the scene, McQueen falls out of the truck at night. He's blind. His headlights aren't real, just painted on stickers. Just decoration. He's not built for the real world, only for a racetrack. And so he drives in the dark, loses the road, and drifts into the forest. And he finds a graveyard of cars. Picture that scene. A world where cars are living creatures with brains, with eyes, with biological organs inside. And among the trees their bodies lie, rusted, grown through with branches, some hanging from trees like the hanged, dead, forgotten, unburied. McQueen panics and tries to run and crashes into one of the dead frames. Then, struggling to pull free from barbed wire, he accidentally rips out the engine of a corpse, a living organ from a dead being. And that engine hangs there by its wires next to him while he tries to escape in terror. The scene was cut. The official reason, tonal mismatch. Too scary for a children's film. Too jarring a shift between bright road comedy and gothic survival horror. But here's what interests me. Why did the animators draw it in the first place? Something in the nature of this universe pulled the creators toward the image of rotting bodies in a forest. Something in the logic of a world where cars have human brains inside demanded this image a graveyard of creatures who died alone, in the dark, far from the road. They weren't allowed to see it through to the end. But the trace remained. It's in every door handle on a building's facade, in every pedestrian sidewalk in a world with no pedestrians, in every camper with a bed inside that belongs to a creature which is itself a vehicle. But let's shift, because up next are Easter eggs. And they're far stranger than you think. If you've spent any time in the world of Pixar, you know about Aeoni 113. It's a code that appears in every single film the studio has made. It's the room number of a classroom at the California Institute of the Arts, where nearly all of Pixar's key animators studied John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter. A classroom with no windows, no real door. Students called it the Haunted Mansion. The code gets hidden everywhere. The license plate on Andy's mom's minivan in Toy Story. That's sweet, right? A tradition. A love letter to their alma mater. A secret handshake between artists. But here's where everything flips. In WALL-E, the code A113 isn't a license plate or a sticker in a corner of the frame. It's a classified directive, an order the CEO of By and Large issued to all autopilots in the fleet in 2110. An order that says never return to Earth, never, under any circumstances, even if life on the planet recovers, even if proof is found, even if the ship's captain orders otherwise. A 113 in WALL-E is an end-of-the-world protocol, an algorithmic death sentence for humanity, written by a dead executive from a dead corporation, still running centuries after his death. The same combination of letters and numbers. In one film, a touching signature from artists. In another, machine code that condemns an entire species to eternal exile in space. Is that a coincidence? Or did someone deep inside Pixar sit down and think, what if our studio's signature is both a love letter from graduates and the code for the end of human civilization? I don't know the answer. But I know that from this moment on, you will never see that code without seeing the double meaning. Now, let's talk about the Pizza Planet truck. The yellow pickup with a rocket on the roof, which appears in every single Pixar film. It's fan service, sure. A studio tradition. Animators hide it like a hunting trophy, find it, spot it, smile. In more recent films, it becomes a wooden scooter in 1950s Italy. An asteroid of a very specific shape in the age of dinosaurs. A tattoo on a character's leg. An origami figure on Joy's desk. It's fun. It's cute. But here's one specific instance that stops being just a joke. Brave. Scotland. The 10th century, the Middle Ages. Merida, a witch, magic, bears. And in the witch's cottage, among carved wooden trinkets and magical objects, sits a small, carefully carved wooden figure. A yellow truck with a rocket on its roof. Wait. There were no cars in the 10th century. None. Nobody in medieval Scotland knew what an internal combustion engine was. Nobody had seen a truck. Nobody could have carved that figure unless they had access to information from the future, from the far future, from the late 20th century. Next to that figure, another wooden carving. Detailed, precise work depicting Sully the Monster from Monsters, Inc., Sully is a character from a world that exists roughly 5,000 years after the events of Brave. Who is this witch? How does she know what a creature from the future looks like? How does she have a carving of a truck from the 20th century? Why does the witch disappear every time Marita looks away, literally walking through a wooden door and vanishing? The answer put forward by the deepest Pixar fan theory, and this is arguably the most elegant time loop in the history of animation, goes like this. The witch is Boo, the little girl from Monsters, Inc., grown up, aged, and stranded in the past. Boo, who loved Sully so much that she devoted her entire life to studying the magic of wooden doors, portals through time. Boo, who traveled back into the past, tried to find her friend, and accidentally got stuck in the Middle Ages. Boo, who carved a wooden figure of Sully because she couldn't forget him, and carved the Pizza Planet truck because it was a car from her childhood from the present she had lost. This theory explains everything. The disappearances through doors, same portal mechanics the monsters use, the artifacts from the future in the cottage, the personal belongings of a time traveler, the obsession with bears. Sully looks like a bear on the outside, and the witch keeps trying to recreate his form through her spells. And if it's true, if the entire Pixar universe is linked in one time loop where the actions of monsters from the future created magic in the past, which eventually led to intelligent animals, then the rise of machines, then the By and Large Corporation, then WALL-E, then the mutated insects, and ultimately the monsters, then all of it started with a little girl who just wanted to see her friend. One child's cry in the dark of a room launched a 5,000-year history of planet Earth. But we haven't gotten to the most important part, because all these Easter eggs, all these codes and carvings, they're just the surface, just decoration. Underneath, something much heavier is going on. Do you remember the first 10 minutes of Up? A silent montage. Carl and Ellie meet, fall in love, get married, fix up the house, save coins in a big glass jar, dream of a trip to Paradise Falls, break the jar because of a flat tire, because of a broken leg, because the roof leaks, because that's life. And then Ellie dies, and you cry. Everyone cries. 10 minutes with not a single word of dialogue, and it tears you apart. But here's what stays off screen. After Ellie dies, Carl lives in that house alone. And the company, the B&L Corporation, the same one that will later destroy the planet's ecosystem and launch humanity into space, tries to demolish his house. Concrete towers rise up around him. Machinery with the B&L logo hammers the ground around the clock. Every morning, Carl looks out at a world that has stopped being his world. He's not just a stubborn old man who won't move. He's a man who turned every room into a memory capsule. Every armchair, her armchair. Every wall color, her choice. Every single object in that house is a physical piece of a shared life he cannot and will not let go. This isn't greed. It isn't stubbornness. It's grief that froze solid and turned into attachment to things because things don't go anywhere, unlike people. And the B&L Corporation, the same one that will one day turn Earth into a garbage dump, throws the full weight of the system at him. When a construction worker named Steve accidentally knocks over a mailbox that still has Carl and Ellie's handprints on it, the last sacred object he had left, Carl hits him with his cane. And the system instantly turns that into a criminal matter. The court declares him a public menace. He's ordered to move to a retirement home. You know what's most terrifying about that scene? In the courtroom on a bronze plaque is the number AON813, that same code. Here, it marks the bureaucratic machine stripping an old man of his last connection to his dead wife. This is the system. This is B&L in the early stages of its expansion. This is a scene from the world before WALL-E, a world where people still exist, but the machine is already running. And the small wooden house surrounded by construction cranes is the last stronghold of human memory against the faceless logic of capital. Carl ties 1,000,000 balloons to the house and flies away. It's a fairy tale. It's the little man winning against the system. But in the real world, the filmmakers were building alongside the film, there was a woman named Edith Macefield, an 84-year-old woman from Seattle. She was offered $1 million for her old house sitting in the middle of a new shopping development. She refused. Stores and offices grew up around her. She died in 2008. The house was torn down. Carl flew away on balloons. Edith didn't. And that's exactly the contrast. Up is about the fact that in real life, you don't have a million balloons. You only have a choice. Hold on to the past or let it go. And the film that looks like an escape story is actually a story about how the only way to win is to stop holding on. In the end, Carl throws all the furniture out of the house, the armchairs, the clocks, the refrigerator. He lightens the house to fly again. It's a story about being set free from the weight of the past, wrapped inside an adventure movie for kids. And that house, at the end, stands by the waterfall, without Carl. Carl doesn't need it anymore, because the house was never the house. It was Ellie. And Ellie didn't live in the walls. She lived in him, and that, I'll say it again, is only the surface. By the way, if your sanity is already hanging by a thread and your childhood is cracking, now's the perfect time to subscribe and hit like. Because from here, there's no going back and we're heading somewhere it gets truly dark. Because next come the toys. Toys that live forever. Toys that feel pain. Toys that cannot die. Toys that right now, while you're watching this, are lying somewhere in a landfill, fully conscious and rotting. I said toys are lying in a landfill, fully conscious and rotting. And I'm not backing away from that because right now we're going somewhere you don't come back from with the same eyes. Welcome to the real Pixar. You thought Toy Story was about friendship, about toys being alive and loving their kids. A warm story, a safe story. Now I'm going to ask you one question, and after it, this story will never feel warm again. What happens to a toy when it gets thrown in a landfill? Not an incinerator, a landfill, a regular municipal solid waste site, where it lies under tons of garbage, in the dark, in the rain, in the snow, under toxic liquids seeping down through layers of waste. Here's what director Lee Unkrich said when he was asked directly whether toys can die. His answer: they live as long as they physically exist. If they're completely destroyed in an incinerator, for example, that's the end. Game over. But as long as the material holds any kind of shape, consciousness keeps running. A toy made of plastic and polyester takes hundreds of years to break down, sometimes thousands. It won't die in a landfill. It will lie there in full consciousness, feeling the paint peel, feeling the plastic crack in the cold, feeling the metal joints rust and lock up forever, and it won't be able to do a single thing. Absolutely nothing. Stinky Pete in the second film says it out loud. He tells Woody directly, "Rotting in some landfill forever." That's not an exaggeration. That's a word-for-word description of the fate waiting for any forgotten toy. But the scariest part isn't even that. The scariest part is that they remember. While a toy rots in the dark under tons of garbage, it remembers the child. It remembers the touch. It remembers being held, being played with, hearing its name called. That child grew up long ago, got old, died, was erased from history, and the toy is still there, still feeling, still remembering, and it cannot die. That's not immortality, that's a curse. That's the hell Pixar built into the foundation of its most beloved franchise and wrapped in bright colors and jokes about Buzz Lightyear. But let's go deeper, because the landfill is the final stage. Before that, something happens to toys right here, right now, while they're still in children's hands. Here's a fact that will change the way you watch every single scene in Toy Story. Toys aren't forced to freeze when a human walks in. It's not magic. It's not some external law that shuts down their movement. It's a voluntary, conscious, deeply ingrained choice. They decide not to move. The proof? In the first film, Woody and Sid's mutant toy army consciously and in perfect coordination come to life right in front of the boy, right in front of him. They break the rule on purpose because they decide the stakes are high enough. In the fourth film, the toys collectively take control of a moving RV right in front of adults. So they can. They just don't in everyday life. Now think about what that means for every normal scene. When Sid picks up Buzz Lightyear and starts ripping his arm off, Buzz doesn't resist. He lies there in full, crystal clear consciousness. He feels every movement. He understands what's happening, and he stays silent. He voluntarily paralyzes himself because that's the contract with humans: never show that you're alive. When a hyperactive toddler at Sunnyside Daycare smashes toys together, throws them against the wall, drags them across the floor by a leg, they feel all of it. They choose silence. They swallow the pain and hold still. This isn't stoicism. This is systematic, daily, voluntary suffering, and they go through it again and again for what? To preserve some grand contract with creatures who, in most cases, don't even know they're alive. You could spend a long time talking about what this looks like philosophically, a place with no life and no death. Just endless waiting. The toys are serving a life sentence of forced labor with a factory-painted smile, and any show of their true nature in front of a human breaks the contract and could cost them everything. But that's still not the full picture, because there's one character who takes all of this horror to an entirely different level. The fourth film introduces a character who, if you think seriously about him, is one of the most tragic figures in all of Pixar. Forky, a plastic spork, a disposable fork spoon made from trash, a pipe cleaner, clay, a popsicle stick. Bonnie makes him in kindergarten in a moment of anxiety, writes her name on his legs, and he comes to life. He didn't ask for this, and the first thing Forky does is try to throw himself in the trash, again and again and again. This isn't a comedy gag, even though the film sells it as one. This is a creature that was forcibly, without consent, yanked from a state of non-existence and burdened with a consciousness it never wanted. And the first, strongest instinct of that consciousness is to go back, into the trash, into nothing, into stillness. Forky screams, "I'm not a toy, I'm trash!" And that's not just a funny line. It's the cry of a creature that understands the gap between what it is by nature and what it's being forced to be. In psychology, this is called the death drive. The idea that a living creature sometimes longs to return to the state of rest that existed before its birth, to a place with no pain, no responsibility, no pressure to live up to the expectations of someone alive. And Pixar packed this concept the pull toward non-existence, the refusal to be into a kid's movie about a fork with googly eyes. But here's what haunts me. When Forky first woke up, he already knew he was trash. That knowledge was built into him from the moment of his creation. And that raises a terrifying question. Did that plastic fork have some dormant consciousness even before Bonnie picked it up? Was it lying in the trash can, feeling something? Quietly, motionless, in the dark, knowing only that it was garbage? And if so, how many objects around us are in that state right now? How many things lie in dark drawers, waiting for someone's hand to accidentally unlock their mind and turn them into slaves of someone else's attachment? The line between life and death in this universe is a child's whim, random, accidental, completely unconscious. Now let's talk about Sid, the boy in the first film who lives next door to Andy and specializes in destroying toys. We see him as a villain. He blows up toys, straps them to rockets, runs surgical experiments sewing the head of one doll onto the body of another, mounting a baby doll on metal spider legs. We're supposed to fear him, hate him. But here's the thing. Sid doesn't know the toys are alive. To him, they're just objects made of plastic and metal. He's not a sadist toward living creatures. He's a curious kid playing with things. He takes them apart the same way another kid might take apart an old alarm clock or a radio. That's not a defense. It's something far more disturbing. It means the absolute terror his victims experience is terror caused by ignorance. Sid will never know what he did. He will never get the chance to feel remorse. His crimes will stay invisible to him forever. Now, let's talk about the creatures living in his room. The mutants. Toy chimeras he created. A baby doll's head on metal spider legs baby face. The Janie doll, whose body belongs to a plastic pterodactyl. An entire collection of disfigured beings, hiding under the bed and in dark corners. Woody sees them for the first time and thinks they're monsters. Cannibals. A threat. He's wrong. They are the most tragic characters in the first film. Because when Babyface taps out the message RR come out in Morse code on the metal bed frame gathering the others, it's not a threat. It's communication from a highly intelligent creature with no voice, using the only method available to it. It's guerrilla underground resistance. It's a cell of traumatized, broken, but still conscious beings fighting to survive. They can't scream. The code of hiding. They can't ask for help. They can't explain their suffering. They exist in total silence, and yet in full consciousness, they understand every second of their disfigurement. And here I want to stop and ask you a question. How many components of the original toy need to be destroyed or replaced for the original consciousness to disappear? Is Babyface's baby doll head the same person who existed in that doll before Sid? Or is it someone new, born again inside a monstrous body. Does she remember who she was before? Does she feel the gap between what she is now and what she was designed to be at the factory? This is an ancient philosophical question. How many parts of a ship do you need to replace before it stops being the same ship? Except here, it's not theoretical, it's living. How many pieces of a toy need to be replaced before it stops being the same person? Sid never asked himself that question. He just kept building his monsters. Now a theory that's been alive in the fan community for years. And it's built so well that I can't just wave it away. What if Nemo doesn't exist? Let's break this down step by step. The film opens with a barracuda attack. Coral dies. Almost all the eggs are destroyed. Marlin finds one, the only survivor, and names him Nemo. Nemo, in Latin, means nobody. Finding Nemo is literally finding nobody. Marlin's psychological profile is a textbook portrait of a creature broken by life in a single moment and who never recovered. He can't let Nemo out of his sight. He won't swim past the edge of the anemone, can't look at the open ocean without panic. The barracuda haunts his nightmares. He has flashes of anger, irrational reactions to completely neutral things. This isn't just an anxious dad. This is the clinical profile of a creature whose mind was shattered in one moment and never healed. And here's the theory. Marlin's mind, unable to accept the reality of total loss, created a hallucination. Nemo is a defense mechanism. A psyche that cannot accept that there are no survivors. Not a single one creates a survivor from nothing. Hence the lucky fin, small, underdeveloped, smaller than the other. Marlin projects his failure to protect his family onto a physical defect in his imaginary son. It's his self-punishment built into the very design of the invented creature. He imagined a child with a flaw because he feels flawed himself. Inadequate. Guilty. The whole obsession with control that's not the overprotection of a real parent. It's the paranoia of a mind that instinctively knows its own reality is fragile. That if he lets go, if he lets Nemo drift too far, everything will collapse. Marlin yells at Nemo right before Nemo disappears. He's angry at him for disobeying. And when the diver takes Nemo, it's not a kidnapping. It's the moment when the defense structure breaks free and starts living by its own rules. The entire journey across the ocean is Marlin moving through the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. In the ending, when he lets Nemo go, he lets go. He accepts the loss. He integrates it into his identity. And the line, "Go have an adventure," that's not a father talking to a child. That's a person finally saying the goodbye he couldn't say the day the barracuda took everything. Andrew Stanton said in interviews that the film is based on his own experience. He kept stopping his son, wouldn't let him do what he wanted, and one day realized his fear was killing their relationship. This is a real story about a real father and a real child, but that doesn't disprove the theory. It confirms it. Because Marlin's psychological portrait is so precise, so accurate, that the theory of his breakdown works perfectly. As if Stanton, without knowing it, drew a man who doesn't need a fishing trip, he needs therapy. And this is where we arrive at something almost nobody says out loud. Syndrome from The Incredibles is the most prolific serial killer in the history of children's animation. Not an exaggeration, a fact. His database on the terminal at Nomanisan Island documents the murders of at least 15 superheroes. 15, each one killed methodically, by design, with documentation. Each kill logged with the status terminated. Every death isn't a villain's victim in combat, it's the result of years of carefully planned hunting. And the methodology is what makes Syndrome truly terrifying. He didn't just kill, he trained the weapon to kill better. Here's how the scheme worked. A superhero was offered a secret, high-paying mission stop, a rogue military robot. The hero arrived, fought the Omnidroid. The Omnidroid scanned every hit, every move, every ability, and either won outright or lost, but Syndrome analyzed the data and built a new version, improved, designed specifically for that hero. Every survivor eventually met the next version already perfectly calibrated to their abilities. There were no survivors. Psychwave, with her telekinesis against an inanimate machine, 0 result. The Omnidroid destroyed her. Data recorded. Next. Macroburst with his hurricane force winds beat the first version because that version was sluggish. Syndrome re-engineered it, built a two-legged model with improved balance. Macroburst died in the next round. Gamma Jack with his radiation attacks destroyed version 5. Syndrome built version 6 with full electromagnetic shielding. Gamma Jack was helpless. He died. This isn't a comic book villain. This is an algorithm. This is machine learning, where each next version gets smarter from the death of the previous victim. Every death is a lesson for the system. Every hero is a training dataset. And here's what makes it all hit hardest. Syndrome documented everything. He saved video recordings. He kept a registry. He could open a file at any moment and watch a specific person die. This isn't indifference to the victims, it's far worse. It's collecting. Behavioral psychology describes this pattern like this. The victims aren't targets. The victims are trophies. That's not just cruelty, that's deep personal pathology. Shan Yu from Mulan killed armies. Scar killed his brother. Frollo burned cities. All of them villains with massive body counts. But none of them killed with this kind of surgical, individual precision. None of them studied each victim personally and built a custom instrument of death just for them. And all of it started with one moment. A boy went to his hero and said, "I want to be your partner." Mr. Incredible turned him away. That's it. That was enough. A childhood wound, received at the right moment in the right circumstances, crystallized over 15 years into an ideology of genocide. Brilliant intellect with not one drop of empathy, and an entire generation of powered people was wiped off the face of the earth simply because one boy didn't get the attention he wanted. And you know what's most disturbing about this whole story? Syndrome's final plan was to sell his technology, to give everyone the ability to be a superhero. His final line, "When everyone's super, no one will be." That's not just revenge. That's cultural erasure. He didn't want to destroy the people with powers, he wanted to destroy the very concept of being exceptional. Because being exceptional once rejected him. This isn't a villain from a kid's movie. This is a story about what happens when a person with enormous potential only ever needed one thing for someone who mattered to say yes. And this still isn't the bottom. So let's go down, all the way to the end. Let's start with a question that sounds innocent, almost funny. Where does the food on the Axiom come from? The ship launched in 2105. On board roughly 600,000 people. The original plan a 5-year cruise while robots clean up Earth. But Earth turned out to be irreversibly contaminated. BNL activated Directive A113 Never Return, and the ship kept flying. 700 years. Where are the farms? The livestock complexes? The hydroponic greenhouses? There isn't a single second, a single frame in the film showing a source of food. Only liquid in cups. Bright, chemically colored uniform liquid. And here's what the official bonus materials reveal about population numbers. At launch, roughly 600,000 people. By 2000, 805 fewer than 10,000. More than 590,000 people disappeared over 700 years of perfect, safe, shielded from every external threat existence. Where did they go? Every morning the computer reads, Captain McCree, a standard status report. Reactor temperature, passenger count, jacuzzi pH level, and the regenerative buffet. No changes, regenerative. That word means one thing: the food source reproduces itself. A closed loop. A system that uses its own waste to create new resources. In a completely sealed system, no farms, no outside supply, no photosynthesis at any visible scale. The only biological material the ship produces in sufficient quantities to sustain 600,000 people is the people themselves. Thermodynamics is a brutal science. Only about 10% of energy transfers to the next level of the food chain. Close the loop, and the population shrinks. Geometrically, inevitably. Exactly what we see in the data. From 600,000 to 10,000 over 7 centuries. Autopilot Otto isn't a villain in the classic sense. He's just an algorithm running a directive. Maintain population viability at any cost. And he found a solution. The only solution available in a closed system. The passengers of the Axiom are drinking their ancestors. They don't know. Bright chemical dyes. Thick, uniform texture. The sweet taste of synthetic flavoring. The ship made sure nobody ever asks that question. Because happy, uninformed consumers are the only thing the system needs to keep running. It's as if the reality of a horrifying survival was hidden behind the glossy storefront of advertised comfort. BNL sells happiness, that's literally what their billboards say. And underneath 700 years of quiet, sanitized, algorithmically justified cannibalism, and the little rusty robot on the garbage planet below, collecting old things and watching musicals, knows none of this, and finds a living sprout in the ground, and carries it to the ship. The plant isn't just a symbol of hope, it's a break in the cycle, photosynthesis, an external energy source, sunlight converted into food without using human biomass. That's why Otto fights so desperately to destroy it. Not because he's following the directive against returning, because the sprout means the end of the closed system, the end of his control, the end of a 700-year secret. Coco is the most beautiful Pixar film, bright, warm, full of music and colored lights, and at the same time the cruelest in its philosophy. Because at the heart of this film is a concept that Mexican culture articulated long before modern psychology had language for it. The concept of 3 deaths. The first death, when the heart stops beating. The second, when the body is put in the ground. The third, when there is no longer a single person alive in the world who remembers you. The third death is the only real one. The first 2 are just biology. The third is the complete, final, irreversible erasure of a person. You no longer exist anywhere, not in the world, not in anyone's mind. There's a scene in the film with Chicharron. An old musician Hector visits in the slums of the land of the dead. Hector arrives and sees him fading. Literally, the edges of his body are becoming transparent, blurring, because the last woman who remembered him in the land of the living just died. Hector asks him to hold on, plays his favorite song, and Chicharron smiles one last time and dissolves into golden dust. For a child, this is a sad, beautiful, magical moment. For an adult, it's a visualization of one of the deepest fears that exist. Not the fear of physical death, the fear of becoming meaningless. The fear that your life, all your choices, all your experiences, and everything you ever loved will disappear, not when you die, but when the last person who mattered to you is gone. There's an existential psychotherapist named Irvin Yalom. He spent decades studying this specific fear. The fear of non-existence, not physical death, but total erasure from the memory of the world. When the ripples from a stone thrown in the water have finally smoothed out, and the surface looks as if the stone was never there. Pixar put this philosophy into a children's film, and delivered it through a character who dies right in front of you, not from illness, not from a villain, but from being forgotten. But here's what won't leave me alone. The world of the land of the dead in Coco reproduces the social inequality of the living world with perfect accuracy. Ernesto de la Cruz, a murderer, a thief, a man who poisoned his best friend and stole his song's lives in a luxury skyscraper, throws parties, basks in the worship of millions, because millions remember him, because his songs played on the radio, because fame has no morality. And Hector, the real author of those songs, a loving father, a man who gave up everything for his family lives in a slum, on the edge of the third death, because he was forgotten. The afterlife is not fair. It doesn't level the rich and the poor, the righteous and the wicked. It freezes the injustice of the living world and continues it forever. Good people die twice, first physically, then from being forgotten. Famous tyrants live on forever as long as history books remember them. This isn't an accident. This is the point. This is what the creators wanted to say. Inside Out is the film where Pixar did the impossible. They took clinical depression, the crisis of growing up, and losing yourself, and visualized it all so precisely that therapists around the world started using this film in sessions with patients. But there's one moment in this film that almost never gets talked about because it's hidden behind the tears and pulls all the attention to itself: the death of Bing Bong, Riley's imaginary friend, a semi-transparent candy and cotton candy pink elephant cat dolphin, a creature who lives inside the girl's memories, literally inside her memories, and slowly disappears as Riley grows up. He knows this. He knows he's being forgotten. He's watched other imaginary friends fade into the dark of the memory dump. He can't stop it. He can only accept it. And in the climactic scene, when the only way to save Joy and get her back to Riley is to use Bing Bong's rocket, which doesn't have enough power for two, he makes a choice. Quietly, without drama. He jumps out of the rocket and starts to fade. Joy calls his name from below. He looks down at her from above and says, "Take her to the moon for me." This is not the death of a villain. It's not a heroic death in battle. It's the quiet, voluntary acceptance of your own forgetting. It's a creature that understands its time has passed, that Riley has grown up, that she no longer needs an imaginary friend and chooses to leave with dignity to make room for something new. In the world of Inside Out, the death of imaginary friends isn't the exception. It's the rule. Every child who grows up kills them, not on purpose, just by stopping to remember. And they don't die fast, they slowly fade in the dark of the memory dump until nothing is left. This is the same third death from Coco. Only this time the source of forgetting isn't time or obscurity. It's the child himself who keeps living and growing. Every one of us killed our own Bing Bong. We just don't remember it. I've taken you through cars with human brains inside, through toys that cannot die and rot in landfills in full consciousness, through a serial killer with a victim database, through a psychologically shattered fish who possibly invented his own son, through cannibalism on a luxury space cruise, through death by forgetting, through imaginary friends we all killed as we grew up. And now I want to tell you something important. All of this is about the same thing. Every one of these stories is about what it means to love something, knowing it will end, or that it already has. Carl builds a house mausoleum because he can't accept that Ellie is gone. Marlon creates an imaginary son because he can't accept the void. Toys voluntarily endure the torture of stillness because a child's love, even the kind that causes pain, is the only reason they exist. Boo gives her entire life to studying the physics of wooden doors because she can't let go of one creature from another dimension. Bing Bong jumps out of the rocket quietly, without a word, because love for Riley matters more than his own existence. These aren't films about toys, not films about cars, not films about fish or monsters. These are films about loss, written in a very dark language, for very small people who don't yet know what to do with that language. Pixar does the same thing over and over for 30 years. They take the most terrifying things in human experience, death, forgetting, loneliness, the sense of meaninglessness, the inability to hold on to what you love and wrap them in bright colors and funny voices. Because children won't let that conversation in through the front door. But through a story about talking toys, they will. And adults will too. Because adults long ago forgot how to cry about real things. They lost the ability to name their monsters. And so they're given a movie, and they sit in a dark theater next to their children, and they cry. Officially about a little wooden cowboy doll. Unofficially about everything they lost and never got around to letting go. Lee Unkrich once said in an interview about Toy Story 3, "We wanted to make a film about how hard it is to let go of the past. But only later did I realize we made a film about death." They always make a film about death, every time. They just call it something else. The Pixar universe spans 700 million years from dinosaurs to monsters. It has seen wars, genocides, environmental collapse, corporate dictatorships, cannibalism in space, and time loops powered by a child's love. And all of this, all this darkness, all this horror, was set in motion by a little girl who simply didn't want her friend to leave.